team routine to a close, and they're all going to come back and land on the grass. These are aeroplanes with some tricky ground handling characteristics as much as anything else. Such as this, in period. Towards the west end of the flight line, that's going to be going off to hold. To obtain a licence from the British government. Ask, is this MiG-15 in American markings, those of the early post-war US Air Force? Well, this also dates from the Korean War period. It represents a MiG-15 BIS model from the North Koreans that fell into US Air Force hands. It happened on the 21st of September 1953 when Senior Lieutenant No Kum-sok of the Korean People's Army Air Force took off from his base at Sunan near the North Korean capital, Pyongyang. He was heading for Kimpo Air Base in South Korea. During his 17-minute flight, the aircraft went undetected. He duly landed at Kimpo and defected to the west. When he Mula offering $100,000 to the first pilot to defect to South Korea with a MiG-15 BIS. It wasn't the first such aircraft, however, to fall into Western hands, because a Polish Air Force pilot had defected in March 1953, landing on the Baltic island of Bornholm. The Americans decided to retain the MiG to evaluate it. It was transported to Kadena Air Base on the Japanese island of Okinawa in a C-124 Globemaster transport. It was flown by various pilots, including Major Chuck Yeager. And they noted its strengths and weaknesses over the experienced in the Korean War combats, not least due to their Second World War experiences. However, the MiG-15 was seen to have a better climb rate than its adversary. Against that, the MiG's handling characteristics in some regimes were somewhat trickier. That airframe that had been surrendered was Some of those evaluations took place at Havilland Air Force Base in Florida, but it was back at Wright-Patterson, the National Museum of the US Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
De ma megint csak alsó látszik.
MiG-15s were flown by all the Warsaw Pact to be under license, the Havilland Vampire. One of the prettiest of all British combat aircraft designs, the Vampire. It was initially known, and you can see why, as the Spider Crab before the name was changed. The twin boom layout, incidentally, with these twin tail booms, was chosen so that they could make the jet pipe shorter and minimise the loss of thrust from the single engine. That was a power plant developed by Frank Halford, who for many years had been de Havilland's engine man, as the Halford H1, before it became known as the de Havilland W. And it's aircraft of very interesting construction veneer inside and outside. The wings, the tail booms, and the tail, by contrast, are all metal. The early Vampires were solely used as day fighters. They were too late to see wartime service, entering service in Mark I form in 1945, but they achieved a lot of notable feats. The first carrier landing and takeoff by a jet were made by the legendary Captain Eric Winkle Brown in a Vampire, as that same year by, once again, number 54 Squadron. All over the world with the RAF. They were used as fighter bombers, there were night fighter variants. The Vampire T-11 trainer was extremely popular and used for many years by the RAF, in fact until 1967. And 31 nations flew them, including the Swiss. The MiG-15 then coming into land first. Delighted to see it being able to perform in spite of the slightly iffy weather, because this is an aircraft that requires the runway here to be dry to be able to land back. In the hands of Kenneth Okvidisler, who founded the Norwegian Air Force Historical Squadron, and flown as ever very smoothly and elegantly. Fast jets, he flew Cessna bird dogs in the forward air control role in the Norwegian Army, and as such operated very close to the borders of the former Soviet Union when they were on exercises up in the far north. Spent many